Well, the stars have been aligning for us. We're quite fortunate. Last November, they had an election, and that was the runoff because no one previously had received more than 50% of the votes. So the two remaining candidates both had experience in government, and they're both leaning towards the democratic style, away from socialism. So they're moving away from Nicaragua and Venezuela and embracing U.S. Interest in foreign investment. Mining is very important to Bolivia. It's 30% of their GDP. Most of that is silver and tin. There's about $2.8 billion that are earmarked for critical minerals.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this live Terreno Resources event. I'm pleased to be joined today by Rick Williams, CEO, to discuss the investment case for the company and the opportunities ahead in this commodity bull cycle. Now, this is a live session, so please submit your questions you have using the chat function in the bottom right corner of your screen. And as always, this event is being recorded and will be available for replay shortly after we conclude. Rick, thanks for taking the time today. Here's how we'll approach this. I'm going to start with a foundational question about why tantalum is so critical right now, then hand it over to you for a brief overview of the Toreno opportunity. After that, I'll jump in with a few clarifying questions to dig deeper. So let's start by laying the foundation. Can you explain why tantalum is classified as a critical mineral and what's driving the unprecedented demand we're seeing, particularly from AI infrastructure and defense applications? And then please take the time to walk us through the opportunity Toreno has and how you're positioned to capitalize on this demand.
Okay, that's a mouthful, but all right. Major economies, including the US, Canada, Australia, the European Union, have all classified tantalum as a critical mineral for two reasons. One, it plays an indispensable role in modern technology, and two, there is a high risk of supply chain disruption. So on the production side, 50% of the tantalum produced is used for electronic capacitors. These are smartphones, computers, and all electronic vehicle components. So they're all dependent on tantalum. It also has unique applications in medical and defense fields. So that's the application side. On the supply side, about 60% of the world's production comes from conflict-prone areas of Central Africa. And while President Trump claims to have solved the war between Rwanda and the DRC, he forgot to tell the rebels that they were not supposed to be continuing the battle. So it's been going on for 30 years. That's viewed as an area of conflict metal, and the Europeans and North Americans are shunning supply from there. So that creates an additional demand factor. Now, you add to that, you've got the US government that recently announced that they want to buy $100 million of tantalum, which is approximately 20% of the annual world's production. And at the same time, you have the war going on in the Central African area, which, as I said, is about 60% of the world's production, and about half of that is shut down, and the other half, much of the other half then goes on to China. So there's a supply constraint. So with that, you've got additional demand from AI. Last year, it was about 10% additional demand. That's going to continue to increase. You've got 5G, and then you've got electric cars that are adding dramatically to the supply constraints. Okay.
And why don't you go ahead and talk about Toreno now?
Well, Toreno, we made a decision last January to take on a project in Bolivia. It's the focus is tantalum. The reason that we took this on is because the opportunity came about. There was a gentleman from Sweden who had invested in the project, was prepared to do it privately, and had bought the equipment and was ready to go into production. And he passed away, unfortunately. So it became an opportunity for us to pick up the pieces. And it was a project that could have been placed into production in 45 days. The equipment was already purchased and there, and the deposits near surface. But we decided to go in a more systematic way and get our exploration license, make sure we had title, get the surrounding lands. We've expanded the area of interest by quite a bit. We're now 3,450 hectares, and there's other places that we want to explore. But this is a means to get to cash flow relatively soon and get to production in a very short period of time. So that was very appealing to us. Now,
you mentioned in the intro that Western nations are actively seeking alternatives to Chinese-dominated supply chains. What specific advantages does Bolivia have in terms of geopolitical positioning and supply chain diversification?
Well, the stars have been aligning for us. We're quite fortunate. Last November, they had an election, and that was the runoff because no one previously had received more than 50% of the votes. So the two remaining candidates both had experience in government, and they're both leaning towards the democratic style, away from socialism. So they're moving away from Nicaragua and Venezuela and embracing U.S. interest in foreign investment. So they've already had visits from a delegation of U.S. companies that want to reinvest there. They're in discussions. They've had relationships with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. So all of that bodes very well for rejoining North America and Canada, particularly. There's a number of Canadian companies down there, but mining is very important to Bolivia. It's 30% of their GDP. Most of that is silver and tin. We're the only ones exploring on this tantalum rich belt.
So there's obviously an opportunity in government funding for critical minerals. How does Toreno fit into this broader strategic initiative? And have you had any preliminary discussions with government agencies?
There's a number of funds recently created. There's about $2.8 billion that are earmarked for critical minerals. This is governments through private equity groups that are looking to invest. Obviously, we've had discussions with them. Our project is too small. They're very interested in what we're doing because they haven't invested in Bolivia in recent years. So they're interested in looking at that. There's a number of government programs that have been brought to our attention, but we're not applying for any of those at this time because in order to secure those, you really need to have a reserve delineated, and that's what we're going to be working on now. We're going to be doing exploration to establish the deposit. That's the one missing element in a public company. We're doing it systematically. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Now, so you mentioned having critical mining equipment already secured and staged. This seems very unusual for a company at the exploration phase. Can you explain the strategic thinking behind this and how it positions you differently?
Yes, well, that was part of the decision making to take on this project. As I mentioned before, the predecessor was a very wealthy individual who was prepared to do mining privately. And after having selected the property, the property selection was made by our in-country manager who used to work for a major assay lab and had sampled the whole area. But he was prepared to buy the equipment, do some bulk samples, and go into production without doing the systematic exploration beforehand. So the equipment is there. It can be reassembled. They used it for the bulk sample. It can be reassembled in 45 days. But before doing that, we want to do some exploration. So in theory, we could have gone into production right off the bat, but we'd like to go systematically and do exploration first.
Now, even going systematically, it's a 12 to 18 month timeline reduction compared to industry standards. It's significant, right? What specific advantages have allowed you to compress the typical project development timeline?
Well, we're on a belt that extends over 120 kilometers. It's well established. There are a number of artisanal operations that mirror what we're doing. We're very close to some of them. And the equipment's already in place. That was one of the attractive elements to this. The selection was made by someone knowledgeable in the area who had taken samples from all over the area. The bulk sample showed that the deposit at surface is economic, so we have no reason to believe that it doesn't continue, but we're going to do some drilling to confirm that.
Now, you pretty much already answered this one, but I have it written down here. Looking at your 2026 roadmap, you're targeting cash flow within 12 months and full production within 24 months. Can you break down the key milestones and what gives you confidence in these aggressive timelines?
Okay. I guess one of the key milestones is closing the financing to have the money to conduct the exploration. And the exploration is not a long-term basis. We have the license in place. We have the relationships with the government and with the indigenous group. Everything's lined up for that. The program is not very extensive. We just want to confirm that we have sufficient to justify assembling the equipment and getting into production, and then we'll continue the exploration past that. And we have the opportunity to do tolling for other deposits in the area because our equipment will achieve better recoveries. So we can make more money with the same amount of work. So the opportunity is there. It's very short term. It's bootstrapping to production and then going from there. So funding is element number one. The exploration program, it's reverse circulation, just establishing sufficient resource to make a production decision, and then assembling the equipment and going back into production.
For sure. And the funding's here and now. You have an open private placement offering 10 million units at 5 cents. Given your secured permits, staged equipment, and near-term production timeline, how should investors think about the current valuation versus where the company could be in 12 to 24 months?
As you know, there's a bump up when you de-risk the project. So if you then have the exploration completed and you make a production decision and you actually achieve production, all of those metrics play into the valuation. So it should be multiples of where we are today.
Now, the $500,000 raise is relatively modest. Can you detail exactly what Milestones' capital will fund and what additional financing will be needed to reach cash flow positive operations?
Okay. The financing was done on the basis of getting us to cash flow. I don't believe we will require additional funds. The exploration program that we're looking at is about $250,000. The equipment assembly and getting to production is another $100,000, $150,000. And then we have working capital from there. And it's not a $500,000 raise per se because we have a warrant component at 7 cents. We anticipate that these warrants will be in the money as we de-risk and progress the project. So it's actually, we have $1 million, and that should give us sufficient capital to have a cushion, maybe get into some of the other elements that we're going to pursue.
And the company's obviously expecting share price appreciation. The warrant structure includes an acceleration provision at 14 cents per share. What specific catalysts and news flow should investors watch for that could drive value realization in the near term?
All right. Well, hopefully the completion of the financing is one. So being a funded junior is already better than where we are today. The exploration should generate some positive results. The decision to go into production should generate some positive results. Getting into production should generate some positive results. And then once we advance this, we should also be changing from being on the NEX, where we're a .H company, to going back to the venture and being a full TSXV listed company. So all of those catalysts should be coming forward in the next few months.
Very exciting times, Rick. Thank you for the update. Thank you for taking the time out of your day. I'll leave you with some closing remarks if you have any, and probably it's good to express what's the best way people can reach you if they're watching this on YouTube after the fact, but I'll leave it in you to close us off here.
All right. Well, we spent the last year securing our title and the exploration license. Politically, things have worked very well. There's been a change in government, change in direction. So all of a sudden, Bolivia is an attractive place to invest. They're courting investment. They're looking for foreign investment. Mining is one of their main areas of interest. They have some extremely large lithium deposits that they're going to put out to auction. So that'll be an international tender. And as I said, American investment is going back there. It's being well regarded. And the dynamics on tantalum are very, very strong right now. The demand keeps increasing. We've got opportunities to expand both locally in Bolivia and in Africa. There's no production in North America. We are also looking at possibilities to expand in the processing to make upstream products. That's something that's down the road, but it's available to us. Obviously, in critical minerals, there's two elements that come into play. One is finding them, and the other is processing them. So we have some interest in having our material processed. We have a good relationship with our advisor in South Africa, and that's something else down the road. So this could become, in relatively short time, a major player in a very niche market.
Wow. Exciting. Rick, thank you again for taking the time out of your day.